We have Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez here. Members, this is AB 305. Assemblywoman Gonzalez, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, we don't allow gender bias in the workplace or in hiring, and in charging for health insurance premiums based on gender is now against federal law. And yet today, men and women are treated differently within our workers' compensation system. This bill seeks to eliminate gender bias against working women in California by addressing very targeted injury situations. AB 305 also seeks to prevent specific conditions found predominantly or only among women from being held against them in apportioned workers' compensation cases. These include contemporaneous conditions of menopause, osteoporosis caused by menopause, pregnancy, or psychological injury due to sexual harassment, and of course, breast cancer as well. I normally would have waived presentation, but my concern was the description of the fiscal impact by the Department of Industrial Relations is so flawed. Quite frankly, I had to come. First of all, this bill was not keyed fiscal in the Assembly. In a previous bill that was much more holistic in 2011, AB 1155 made it through both houses without ever being keyed fiscal. That suggested that every apportionment case should be done away with. The DIR suggests that there are 9,000 cases statewide in 2006 that were apportioned and suggests that every one of them would be litigated under this bill. The problem with that is 9,000 cases. First of all, you have to assume some of those were men. I'd assume about half. So that brings it down to about 4,500 cases. Of those 4,500 cases, you would have to assume that every single apportioned case had to do with a woman who was pregnant or going through menopause, and that was the stated reason by the doctor for apportioning that case. Or the very rare instance where presumption of breast cancer had been established because they're a law enforcement official or a firefighter, and a woman, which we know we're reducing the class size very small, that those would then be litigated under this bill. Those things considered, I hope we can review this fiscal analysis, and even if it was a logical argument, I think the 9,000 figure obviously is way too high, and the $4 million appropriated for it yearly. So I respectfully ask for your consideration. With me today is Jason Marcus, the practicing workers' compensation attorney, for any possible questions.
Thank you. Witnesses in support.
Mr. Chair and committee members, Jason Marcus. I'm an applicant attorney here in Sacramento. I represent injured workers. I take issue with the fiscal analysis that suggests that litigation costs will be increased as part of this bill. That's, I think, the bulk of the $4 million that the DIR has ascribed to this bill. As it stands right now, if I have a client where the doctor apportions to menopause or pregnancy, frankly, that case is going to be litigated. We're going to have to take the doctor's deposition, go to a hearing, invest time and energy to litigate that issue. If this bill were in place, there would be a prohibition on apportionment, and that would actually reduce litigation. The apportionment would not be allowed. There would be nothing to litigate, nothing for a judge to have to decide. And so we think the cost will actually go down rather than increase under this bill. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Additional witnesses in support.
Mike Carroll with the California Applicant Attorneys. We're the sponsor of the measure, and we concur with Mr. Marcus's analysis.
Pat Whalen, Ellison Wilson Advocacy, here on behalf of United Nurses Association of California, Union of Healthcare Professionals, a proud member of AFSCME, and support.
Thank you. Additional witnesses in support. Please come forward. Witnesses in opposition. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Kate Conley with the California State Association of Counties. We're in opposition to AB 305. We actually do believe that it could potentially raise major costs for us in the areas of permanent disability awards, as well as possible litigation cost increases. California is ranked number one in cost of the workers' compensation systems. Counties right now are struggling to even provide basic services to our residents. These cost increases, which are potentially significant and, as far as I know, unknown, could really cripple our economies and our local governments. So for that reason, we oppose.
Thank you.
Alicia Lewis with the League of California Cities, just mirroring the comments made by my colleague from the counties about the concerns and comments regarding the measure. Thank you.
Sylvia Solisha on behalf of the California Coalition on Workers' Compensation in opposition, and I've also been asked to voice opposition of the California Chamber of Commerce. Thank you.
Thank you. Finance.
The Department of Finance is opposed to this bill. While it is intended to remedy apportionment calculations that may lessen benefits for women, it could result in future perceived inequities by failing to give equal treatment to other conditions peculiar to race, ethnicity, or gender. Since this bill creates exceptions to the existing evidence-based medical standards used to make workers' compensation determinations, it may result in employers paying for non-industrial injuries as part of permanent disability awards.
Thank you. Comments or questions from committee? Senator Nielsen.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, could the gentleman who spoke on behalf of the applicant's attorneys come up for a quick
Absolutely.
question? Thank you, gentlemen. Our analysis indicates that there would be significant increased litigation costs, and I believe I heard testimony to the effect that you feel this would be resulting in less litigation. Why would the applicant attorneys support a bill that resulted in less litigation?
Well, my goal is to provide benefits, or obtain benefits, I should say, on behalf of my clients, injured workers, in the most timely and expeditious manner. Reducing litigation decreases the amount of time that my clients have to wait to obtain benefits, to get treatment, and to get back to work. So the fewer roadblocks that are in place to obtain those benefits, and the fewer challenges that the defense raises to resist those benefits, the better for my clients.
So you're assuring this committee that this will result in less litigation then?
Based on my experience, I believe it will. We have similar bills in the workers' compensation system. For example, presumption bills that provide for injuries like cancer, heart injuries are presumed to arise out of employment for certain classes of employees, safety, correctional officers, firefighters. And in those cases, we find that those cases are more often than not accepted very quickly. Benefits are provided quickly. If we didn't have the presumption, we would have a long, protracted litigation to have to prove up the injury, and it would take, frankly, years in those cases to prove them up. So when I see bills that provide a bright line rule, either acknowledging an injury or preventing apportionment on an issue, that, in my experience, reduces litigation.
Well, I would argue presumptions aren't necessarily in the best interest of local governments, nor private businesses, nor individuals. But you've answered the question to your satisfaction, probably not to mine. I have great respect for the author, but the bill I have some problems with. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Senator Bates.
Thank you. Just to Department of Finance, any cost assigned to workers' comp for the state? Has there been an analysis of that? If you mentioned it, I missed it.
No,
that's
a great question, and that's not something that we've identified at this point.
Okay.
I mean, we can reasonably infer that there could be. We have the same costs that have been noted both in the committee analysis and by the author that we got from the Department of Industrial Relations, and we would note that, as with anything, any additional request for resources would be evaluated during the budget process and would, of course, be dependent upon how much actual increased either litigation or mediation or whatever ends up happening to them.
Well, Assemblywoman Gonzalez, I just want to let you know that I think it's a noble approach, but I was here in the Assembly back in the early 2000s, and workers' comp costs in the state for our state government and for businesses was in crisis. So I'm very reluctant to look at anything that would increase those costs at the moment when we're still recovering. But I want you to know that I certainly respect what you're trying to do here. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments or questions from committee? Senator, would you like to close?
Sure. I just, I do want to point out that there were two things that stick in my mind. One is that we're fearful of perhaps passing this bill because maybe it'll highlight other ways that protected classes are discriminated against in workers' compensation. And I think that's a sad state of affairs when we're saying if we correct these conditions for women, maybe we have to look at some of the other misappropriations of apportionment that we have in our law. But secondly, I do want to point out one thing. The cost as far as to the state or the counties, this is the cost in the so-called evidence-based percentage. A woman who, first of all, already has a presumption, so those aren't going away. So she's a law enforcement official or a firefighter, and she gets breast cancer. It's presumed because that's the state law. She gets 0% of a rating for that breast cancer because we rely on the AMA, which guideline that says that breasts are worthless, quite frankly. If she's of childbearing age, she'll get 5%. And that's, I think, for the loss of maybe being able to breastfeed, 5%. Yet if her counterpart, a male, with that same presumption, the cancer presumption, gets prostate cancer or scrotum cancer or any other cancer of their parts, quite frankly, they get a 16 to 30% rating. There's something out of whack here. And unfortunately, quite frankly, we need to correct it, because when you rely on something that has a discriminatory effect, we need to acknowledge that that's happening and correct it. So I've said time and time again, my breasts are as worthwhile as your prostate, and I think they should be reflected in California law. So I respectfully hope you'll consider the analysis of this.
Thank you. So let me, I want to make sure you had some questions in terms about our procedures. Ledge Council does not key these bills pertaining to workers' comp as fiscal, but it has been the standard practice of the Senate to request a referral on these measures. And so I just want to make sure you know our practices here in the Senate. I look forward to working with you as with this bill to address the cost issues, perceived or not, during the suspense file calendar. So without objection, we will move this bill to the suspense file. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next, we have in file order, Senator Adrien Nazarian, AB 428. Mr. Nazarian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senators. With a major earthquake looming in our future, it is critically important that the state invest in measures which would make California residents safe and prepared. AB 428 establishes a 5-year 30% tax credit for qualified costs for seismic retrofit construction of qualified at-risk buildings. Specifically, this bill caps the total amount of credits to $60 million over the next 5 years through a process of local certification. The Franchise Tax Board would administer the credit on a first-come, first-served basis. The credit would be taken up by a property owner by 1/5 of the amount over the course of the 5 years, or until the credit is exhausted. This is meant to ease the pressure off the general fund so that the loss of revenue is not burdensome to the state all at one time. Additionally, the provisions of this bill would take effect in January 2017 and would in no way affect the budget which we have just passed. In order to prevent loss of life and the destruction of properties, it is critical that we take the step to prevent such tragedies seen during the Loma Prieta, Northridge, and most recently in the country of Nepal. A FEMA study shows that money spent on hazard mitigation is a sound investment. On average, every dollar spent on mitigation provides our communities with $4 in future benefits. With me, I'm joined by Sylvia Solis-Shaw with the City of Los Angeles, and Kara Ross with the City of Burbank. Thank you for joining me.
Witnesses in support.
Sylvia Solis-Shaw on behalf of the City of Los Angeles. Mayor Eric Garcetti has identified this bill as a priority. We would hope that the costs as outlined in the analysis are outweighed by the potential lives saved and the housing units that would be retrofitted with this tax credit. In the 1994 Northridge earthquake, we lost nearly 50,000 housing units, the vast majority of which were multi-story soft-story apartment buildings. Many of these are currently affordable housing units. We cannot afford to lose any more given the housing crisis in the city. We ask for your support.
Thank you.
Good morning, Kara Ross on behalf of the City of Burbank. The city would just note that we have spent a lot of time talking with a number of our property owners about the need to do the seismic retrofits. And in almost every case, cost is the major decision factor, and we think this bill would really be helpful in turning the tide and getting them to do additional work in strong support.
Thank you. Additional witnesses in support. Witnesses in opposition. Finance.
The Department of Finance is opposed to this bill because it results in general fund revenue losses, and it may subsidize activity that would have occurred anyway, as property owners may choose to seismic retrofit their property to protect their investment. Additionally, the credits are allocated on a first-come, first-served basis, which means the state's limited resources may go to retrofit buildings that are not at the greatest risk of damage from an earthquake. According to the Franchise Tax Board, the bill would result in general fund losses of $700,000 in fiscal year 16-17, $2.7 million in 17-18, and $4.6 million in 18-19. Additionally, the FTB estimates a one-time implementation cost of approximately $255,000 and annual ongoing costs of $128,000 to develop and administer an allocation process, program systems, and test revisions to the existing systems.
Thank you. Comments or questions from committee? Senator Bell.
Having served on the Seismic Safety Commission, I think that investment in seismic safety is very important. Also, when I was a planner for the city of Santa Cruz, we did a seismic safety plan for the city to get property upgraded. And we didn't have an incentive. There wasn't any tax incentive or anything. So several property owners did not do the seismic safety retrofits on the property. 10 years later, the Loma Prieta earthquake devastated downtown Santa Cruz, and several people in those buildings that didn't want to retrofit their building were killed. So I think there are fiscal costs. I think the investment does have a positive fiscal impact in terms of property values, reduced liability, and those kinds of costs. So I think the fiscal analysis ought to be broadened, in my opinion, to look at those issues.
Thank you. Additional comments or questions from committee? Chairman Nazarian, would you like to close?
Just in closing, I'd like to say also thank you for those comments, because that was going to be my closing. This actually helps invest in ensuring human safety, human life safety, ensures in property, to avoid property damage loss, which can be in great estimates, especially in places like San Francisco or Los Angeles. And third, it actually helps invest in job creation right now, because not a lot of folks are taking advantage of making the upgrades necessary. And so this will help ensure that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Nazarian. Without objection, we move this item to suspense file. Thank you. Next, we have Assemblywoman Brown. Senator Brown, you have AB 914. It has a due pass recommendation. Go ahead.
Well, then I could just ask for your aye vote. I'm just kidding. Thank you. AB 914 would grant San Bernardino County associated governments the authority to implement an express lane program in the county on the I-10 and the I-15 corridors. The Inland Empire is the fastest growing region in Southern California, and San Bernardino County in particular has grown from 2 million people and is projected to reach 3.4 million by 2060. Express lane facilities are increasingly being studied as regional transportation agencies throughout California struggle to manage the increasing traffic demands within existing limited budgets. This model uses a congestion pricing to manage traffic demands in the corridor. And as congestion increases, the price would probably increase, but it would at least give us money to provide these lanes, and so we can move our traffic faster. I have with me today someone who would introduce themselves.
This is why I just say, just ask for your aye vote and let the witnesses introduce themselves.
I asked for your aye vote.
It happens to me all the time. Witnesses in support.
Mr. Chairman and members, Delaney Hunter on behalf of the San Bernardino Associated Governments. We are the sponsor of the bill. We believe that 914 and the authority granted by that would allow us to add much needed capacity to both the 10 and the 15, and tolling will essentially be the fiscal tool that we'll use to pay for that construction. We ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. Finance.
The Department of Finance is opposed to this bill, which authorizes Sandbag to charge tolls on 2 state highway sections and to bond against these revenues, because we don't feel it provides the assurances necessary to protect the state from potentially covering shortfalls in the event that toll revenues are not sufficient to cover costs. The bill grants authority to Sandbag to collect tolls, but does not require them to charge rates sufficient to guarantee that revenues received will be sufficient to cover all of these costs, which could leave the state to pay for ongoing maintenance, as has occurred in the past in other projects.
Thank you. Comments or questions from committee? Senator Bates.
I have to oppose this, and I want to let you know my rationale that we have debated at length in Orange County. The concern over allowing hot lanes on our freeways goes to the degradation of the HOV lane. You have to have traffic moving at 45 miles an hour or better, or the federal government says that it's degraded and therefore it removes the 2+ allowed in the HOV lanes at the moment. I believe that that is a significant impact on our seniors. That's a significant impact on our service providers out there, gardeners, plumbers, whomever are driving with 2 in their car and are traveling all over our communities to deliver service, and they will no longer be allowed when you move it to 3+ to ride in the HOV lanes and get to their various jobs on time. So I've really struggled with this because it is a great revenue source. We've seen it on our toll roads as compared to toll lanes in the County of Orange, and we have recently made a contract with Caltrans that those toll revenues off the toll roads will be shared with them. And I think it's 2025 or 2030. It goes out there quite a bit, but those will be shared for maintenance of the road in general. So I'm going to remain opposed. I'm hoping that the people, in authority will start to look at what HOV lanes were originally for. It was called air quality, and work out something so that there's a balance there as our folks who can afford to get in the toll lanes don't congest them so that the folks that can't afford those toll prices are not pushed out. So I just want to let you know I approve it in concept, but the other side of it, the unintended consequences, of great concern to me. I have a community that is many, many service providers, and many, many seniors live in my community.
Okay, well, we have 2.
Assemblywoman, give me 1 second. I just want to clarify. I think the majority of this is for new construction and not conversion, correct?
Right.
Okay, just want to double check. Senator Leyva.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Assembly Member, and I'm a proud co-sponsor of this bill. And I think that really, to Senator Bates' point, I don't think that, at least I know for me, we never looked at it as a revenue source. The congestion is so bad now in this part of the district, and until people have good jobs in the district, they have to drive into Los Angeles for their jobs. We struggled, I know Assemblymember Brown and I both struggled with the idea of charging, because we do worry that that exempts some people. Our hope is that folks that can afford it will be there, and that will free up some lanes for the folks who can't pay or don't want to pay. But until we have better jobs in the district and people don't have to drive to LA, we've got to do something. So I appreciate your concerns, and we don't see it as a be-all, end-all. We hope it's a small little cog in the wheel, no pun intended, to get things moving. Thank you, Senator Brown.
I also want you to know, if it's okay.
Give me a second. Senator Bell.
Well, as Chairman of Transportation, I see we have 3 of the committee members here, so we're probably going to.
Do we have the Brown Act?
But I think it's very important to respond to the fiscal issues brought up by the Department of Finance. If Caltrans and the Department of Finance develop some parameters of how to review these hot lane projects to make sure we have fiscal kind of accountability and those kinds of things, I think that would be fine. That would help, because we're going to see a lot of these projects. Okay, I'm just saying this. This is going to be, we're going to see a lot of these kinds of projects all over the state. All these transit districts, congestion management agencies are going to be proposing these hot lanes, okay? So we need to have some fiscal parameters of what kind of conditions in terms of ongoing maintenance, responsibility, what happens if they don't produce enough revenue. Those kinds of issues have to be laid out. And I think it's very important that we have those kind of conditions, and, so because they're going to be proposed all over the state, everywhere. There's going to be proposals in all urban areas.
Thank you, Senator Bell. Senator, would you like to close?
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
First of all, this construction will be new construction, as Senator Lara has said. And so we will have a hot lane, and we will also be able to have the HOV lane as well. So I think there's maybe one place where it would kind of come together, but for the most part, we'll have 2 lanes. This is all new. And it will relieve the stress on everyone. And then we're looking at And the reason why we can't tell you anything about the cost now is we're looking at how we might allow senior citizens, those that are poor, those that need the help, to come in and have a sticker that would be either much less or even free. So it's something that we're working on, and as this moves forward, I too understand, because I've been where you've been, and I've seen what has happened with this, and I have people in my district that are for it and against it. So we understand that, but there's no other way for us to do anything. Gas taxes are just about gone because we want electric cars. So we have to figure out how we're going to make this work. How will we continue to help our freeway system, especially in the Inland Empire?
Thank you,
Thank you.
Councilwoman.
And I ask for your vote.
I definitely think this is one tool that we can use. I'm very familiar with that area. I started as a field rep out in the 909 for Senator Soto, and it was always been an issue out there. So I think this is, yeah, and it definitely gets worse, which automatically also compounds the bad air quality that we have out in the Inland Empire. So with that, we'll take that as your close. It's moved, the bill is moved by Senator Leyva. Secretary, call the roll.
The motion is due pass to the Senate floor. Laura?
Aye.
Laura, aye. Bates? No. Bates, no. Bell? Aye. Bell, aye. Hill? Leyva? Aye. Leyva, aye. Mendoza? Nielsen? Nielsen, no.
So everyone, we're going to keep that, the roll open to allow absent members to add on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, file order, we have Senator Jones, my fellow San Diego State Aztec.
Go Aztecs.
Go State. Go ahead, Senator, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman and Senators. Today I'm presenting AB 921, which will require the establishment of a disciplinary review committee, also known as a DRC, which a licensed private investigator could voluntarily opt into to contest the assessment of an administrative fine or to appeal a denial of a license. Currently, licensed private investigators who want to contest the assessment of the administrative fine or to appeal a denial of a license must embark upon a process that can take more than a year to obtain a final resolution. By creating a DRC, this saves the licensee time because matters can be resolved more quickly and also saves the Department of Consumer Affairs time and money so they do not have to go through more expensive adjudicatory route. A licensee who disagrees with the DRC decision would be able to return to the current process. What's more, at the Sunset Review hearing held earlier this year, the BSIS noted that the value of the DRCs that currently exist for security guards and alarm companies. So this concept is already in place under the DCA. AB 921 will also allow for DCA to voluntarily collect email addresses for its licensees. There's a lot of E's in those two words. We have taken amendments to delay the start at the request of the DCA to honor before July 1st, 2016. I think it's supposed to be 2017.
17.
Yeah. The bill's cost should be minor and absorbable. With me this morning is Jerry Desmond on behalf of the California Association of Licensed Investigators.
Thank you. Witnesses in support.
Chair and members, Jerry Desmond on behalf of the California Association of Licensed Investigators. We appreciate the committee analysis and the absorbable costs that will come out of the private investigator fund. That's a separate fund at BSIS. And with me today in support is one of our members who is also on the DRC for security guards, Rob Hesse.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Senator. One of the things that I'd like to point out that I've noticed over the years, I've been on the security guard DRC for 6 years now, is a very small percentage go beyond the DRC to the administrative law judge, where the Attorney General's office has to represent BSIS at that level. And it has reduced the cost to BSIS and the state by stepping in between the process and eliminating a very large load that goes on to the administrative law judge. So in the end, the long-term cost savings, there will be a long-term cost savings with this bill.
Thank you. Additional witnesses in support. Witnesses in opposition. Finance.
We're neutral on this bill, and we note that a private investigators review committee could be beneficial. Costs are pretty minor and could be sustained easily by the private investigator fund.
Thank you. Comments or questions from committee? No. Senator Jones, would you like to close?
I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. The bill is moved by Senator Nielsen, by the Republicans in committee. Secretary, please call the roll.
The motion is do pass as amended to the Senate floor. Laura?
Aye.
Laura, aye. Bates? Bates, aye. Bell? Bell, aye. Hill? Leyva? Leyva, aye. Mendoza? Nielsen? Nielsen, aye.
Thank you. Senator Jones, we're going to keep this item open, and in this committee, we do appreciate them or low-colored jacket.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate your appreciation.